Hi, guys. We are live. Thanks for joining us this week on our chat on compelling characters. So we're going to talk a little bit about our favorite and most character we feel is most compelling, why we think that was the author achieved that, and how you can achieve it while writing your own characters. So I'm going to go through and ask the most compelling character that you can think of and what makes them that way. And I have Kelly first.
You're just throwing in the what makes them that way part now.
Well, if you could think of the compelling character, you know why you like them, right?
I know why I like them. I don't know how she did it. Technically, yeah, I picked two because it's Fred and George Weasley, because that for me was the they're not even like main characters, but they jumped out for me right at the beginning. I fell so in love with them right in book one. Is like they get their sweaters mixed up and get their names mixed up because the letters are wrong, and it's just like it was the humor, absolutely, that why I loved them so much, and how they stood out so quickly. Of like they didn't have that many lines leading up to like throughout the first book, but you knew who they were right from the get-go. And they are great.
So the humor is what made them so compelling.
I think so.
Yeah.
And like the magic of Harry Potter. So
yeah. My husband and I are rereading the first Harry Potter right now. Because we're reading the illustrated edition together. And one of the things we noticed was that Fred and George are just like so awesome from page one. They like are helping Harry. They make a bunch of jokes and make him feel comfortable, and then they help him get his stuff on the train, like before they have any clue who he is. He's just like this random 11-year-old, and they're like, "Oh, let us help you get your stuff up there." They're just awesome.
Yeah, I think they're also just like a really good example of like what being funny is, because like they're like hilarious and make jokes all the time, but they're never mean unless it's to like an awful person. You know, like they're always really kind to people and like help other people.
they're so great.
Funny. Like humor is not like and like a. Like, they'll tease people, but, like, they're not mean about it.
And yeah, like they were... Oh, go ahead. You go.
I saw on the internet the other day about how to properly prank someone, and this comes to mind when it's like this, because, a lot of people say, like, pranks are usually, like, kind of mean, but you should be doing them as a lighthearted, fun thing. So Fred and George, confuse, not abuse, in their humor. That's what makes them great.
I think Fred and George are a really good example of like the trickster archetype character. Much in the same way that like Loki is that trickster, but in a much less damaging, potentially murdery type of way.
In a Gryffindor way.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
Good big brothers, and like they're good people. They're just hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, what a
yeah. Very good answer. So I have Rachel next.
Okay, I'm going to pick Victor Vale of V.E. Schwab's Vicious.
Mine's a V.E. Schwab.
I mean, surprised that I friggin' pick a V.E. Schwab book, but that's the one I can think of just like right off the top of my head as someone, and I've also been discussing that book with someone lately, so that's why. But it's a book about basically two supervillains, and you're not trying to root for one of them because they're both awful people. So you can't be like, oh, that one's better than that one, or that one's the good guy and that one's the bad guy. They're both terrible people. One of them is just a little bit worse than the other. And the reason that I like Victor so much is because he's a bad guy. Like, he's doing awful things. He's terrible to people, but you still like him and you still want to know what he's up to and why he's doing it. I think that was really good because there's this whole morally gray aspect to the book that I really enjoyed, because it's like, I need to know more about him, but I don't know why I like him. And like that uncertainty when it comes to characters is what I love reading.
That's super compelling. It's not like you keep turning pages.
Definitely. I like that saying that's like your character either has to be sympathetic or interesting. And I think that falls under the category of very interesting.
Yes.
Megan.
So mine is a Victoria Schwab book. I was going to do August from The Savage Song. He is a monster, and monsters are not supposed to have, like, the human feelings. And so, like, the whole time he's kind of talking about, like, oh, well, I'm imitating these emotions. And this whole time you're like, oh, well, are you? Are you imitating them or are you feeling them? And just... he's put in very interesting situations as well that really test what it means to be human when you are a monster. So I loved him.
Yeah, he was a great. Oh no, Erin.
She said,
No host. We can do whatever we want.
WordNerds running wild. Yeah, August was great, and I also loved his like sibling monsters
Yes.
because they're very strange too. Like the way that they all interact with each other as like a family, even though they're all monsters and they're all not human, is great.
Yeah.
Like the expectations put on them.
She exclusively writes like super Slytherins or just like cinnamon roll Hufflepuffs.
Yeah.
So we've got Victor, who's the super Slytherin, and August, who's the cinnamon roll Hufflepuff.
And then Emma at the end.
I was deciding between like 5 different characters. And one of them was a V.E. Schwab character, so I'm not going to pick that one. Just for the sake of having a little bit of diversity in here in our character choice. But I'm going to go with Aiden from the Illuminae trilogy. Just like so good. And I don't really know how they did it. I don't know how they did anything they did in those books. But I think one of the like really compelling things is because Aiden is not human and is this like machine that has been damaged and like is having like human emotions, but also like very inhuman. Like, I don't know, it's this like weird like clash, and like kind of like all good books with like artificial intelligence in them, it kind of gets into the whole like what makes something human. So yeah, just.
He also makes all these tough decisions that like we as actual humans would not make.
He often makes the decision that needs to be made, but that like humans could never do.
Yeah, definitely. They did that so well at the very beginning, and I won't give away too much, but like the first big thing that he does that's really awful, and you're like, why are you doing that? That's like, why are you doing that? You can't do that. Like as a human, you would be like, you cannot do that, but as a machine, it's like that was the logical thing to do, and that's the best thing to do in that situation. And so it's like, and then later you're like, oh no, like he's bad, he's definitely this, and then as it goes, it's like, but was that the right decision regardless of...
Did he actually save all their lives?
Exactly. I feel like like this big theme here of all of us being like, we like the villains.
And like, and just the development of a character that like isn't human, so like
I want to talk about it so bad.
I know, right? And like just the way that they like circle back to things, because in the 3rd book it circles back to like exact question.
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, so
it's
like
so good.
It's so good.
Excitement.
It was like a finale that lived up to the first 2.
Excitement. Okay.
What's your choice?
I'm trying so hard not to give spoilers. So I was talking about this pre-chat, but I'm currently reading Not Even Bones. And
I'm so jealous you got to meet her.
Oh, it was so cool. And she's actually a really good artist. She did like a little Nita in the front of the book.
Oh,
it's really amazing.
That's
so yeah, I got a signed copy. And so I'm halfway through, and it is so good. I cannot stop reading. And obviously it's the plot and the situation, because it's such a fast-paced plot, but I'm also really fascinated by the characters because it's this like, they're horrible people.
Oh yeah, they are.
People. Oh my God. But they're so fascinating. Like the main girl is like, I'm trying not to give spoilers, but the main girl is like horribly betrayed in a way, and she ends up like doing this kind of slow descent into like a you could see the potential for like a serial killer-ish type personality, and then
she's
it
a
just
monster
goes
dissector,
downhill.
if you aren't sure.
That's not a spoiler. She dissects monsters for a living, essentially, for her family business. And then the guy that she falls in with is just like a horrible person. He's a monster, basically. Very literally. And
he's my favorite character. He's so cool.
Yeah, and you're like, you really hate him at first, though. You really hate him at first.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, just the way that she makes you kind of fall in love with these awful, evil characters. I just really thought that was a very compelling way to like show that every human has like a dark and a light side, and that either can be brought out by a set of circumstances. So
the thing I love about hers too is that she doesn't take any shortcuts. Like a lot of times, or a big trope when you read a book like that is that, oh, well, you know, he's really mean to her, but there's a reason, and he's a good guy on the inside, and they'll be making it by page 30, but like she doesn't do that.
No,
it's like, no, they're bad people, and they're gonna keep doing bad things.
Bad things,
and so almost like
because
by doing what you would expect them to do, she's subverting what we as readers expect, because that's what we've grown accustomed to.
I mean, that's why I like that book so much, is because at the very beginning, like Megan said, you're expecting like, oh yeah,
it's no excuses.
Not actually like that. Like, it's gonna flip it, whatever. But then like as you keep going, there is no flip.
You're like, oh, it's just getting darker.
It's just getting worse now. Okay, great. Like it's,
and I like that there's
because they're monsters, and it's great.
There's no like hand come out of the sky and rescue you either in that book. It's like bad stuff happens to the characters.
I want to read it, but it doesn't sound like my kind of thing at all.
No,
if you like zombie books.
I do, but I like a happy bubble.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Have
see.
you read
No, there's no happy bubble.
No bubble.
Sorry, Megan?
Have you read the Savage Song?
I started it, and then I left my Kindle somewhere.
Okay. If you like that one, I think you might enjoy. Not even bones.
It's pretty gory though. Like it's pretty bloody. It's pretty dark.
I don't like gore. It's just the darkness. I don't know. Like I like nice people.
There's no nice people in that book. Like at
I
all.
don't like this one then.
So we've got some good suggestions in the comments. I don't think we will have heard of all of these, but if you guys have any other ones, characters you want us to talk about, also let us know in the comments what you think makes them compelling. I think the first choice for one that we are aware of is from Ed Griswold, and that is Ronan from the Raven Boys.
I'm wearing my Raven Boys.
Discuss.
I would say all of the characters from the Raven Boys are good.
Yes, obviously.
For sure.
Like characters are definitely her strong suit. That and like creepy atmosphere. But like the characters are very, very compelling. Like you feel like you're friends with them by the time you're like halfway through the first book. You're like, I'm a part of this group of friends.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing.
We've had fun times together.
Yeah, because okay, so we just basically talked about all supervillains in our thing. So like I think it would be quote unquote easier to make a supervillain compelling, because what's their backstory? What made them like that? Oh, they're morally gray. Like what are their
They're more interesting.
Yeah, they're more interesting.
Yeah.
So when you have someone like Raven Boys who are more regular folk, they're all good guys, right? So like what makes them so compelling other than the fact that like they have really nice abs and tons of money?
Well, I was gonna say that, not the abs part. I was gonna say like they're very interesting in spite of being good guys, and I'm like trying to figure out what exactly makes them compelling. I'm not sure if I can put my finger on it like on the spot.
Yeah, I know like part of it is like their interactions with each other, like the relationships they deal with things are very interesting. Yeah.
Like Gantz is probably the easiest because like his obsession and like he's got something a little more interesting about him, but he's not necessarily the best one. It's just the easiest to pin down of like, oh, that's why I remember you.
Right.
Yeah.
But they all have like
you're kind of like following along on that obsession.
Yeah.
Sorry if you hear banging in the background. My house is being renovated at the moment.
I think your house is always being renovated.
It's happened like twice in the last like 3 years. Okay.
But yeah, they all have like rich backstory, and they all, I think something, and this is something that can apply to all characters, protagonists or antagonists, like they all have very clear like goals. It's like the whole idea of like what they fear, what they want, and what they're willing to do to get what they want. Like I know that's like V. Schwab's big thing, and like that is exactly those characters. Like exactly like what all of them want, and like what their desires are, and what their like fears are. And they're all like very relatable things too.
Yeah. They're willing to do just about anything, but the worst thing that could happen to any of them would be losing each other.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly like brought up against them.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
At first, when I saw Ronan mentioned, I was so proud of us for none of us having mentioned it. Like, oh, we've really grown and like branched out to new things. It's just B. Schwab. That's
Heads all
B. Schwab is our
We're just all going
originally
through phases.
I was gonna say someone else, but again, well, like I didn't want to bring up all the supervillains, and I'm gonna bring up 2 more supervillains, which are Kaz Brecker of Six of Crows.
not a super villain. He's a more
Yes,
he's an anti-hero. He's not a super villain.
Okay, sure, anti-hero is good.
It's so funny because I didn't love him. I don't know why I didn't find him compelling.
We'll see. I guess
evil looks I'm getting.
I guess he didn't have to be, like evil for this to work, but like I find him compelling because of how you always know he has a plan. And that is what is like, it's always going through like, what is it? Like, why did he just do that? Like, it can't be insignificant. Like, why is he doing that? Like, you want to know what's going on. So, I mean, he didn't have to be a villain for that one.
I agree. Like, he was super compelling for that, just not necessarily likable. Like, I liked everybody else better, but he was very compelling.
I'd say he's like the most compelling of them, but not the one I like.
Not the one I want to hang out with.
I think that's the problem I had with him. For me, he wasn't compelling for some reason. I don't know why, it just didn't click with me. And then he also obviously is not a likable character. So there just wasn't anything to keep me reading, I guess. I don't know.
I would say I didn't like find him super compelling until I found out his backstory, and that was when I was like, oh, I'm all in for this character. Like, I want to know more.
I read the whole book too. I don't know. It just didn't click for me, I guess, or I've tried 3 times now.
That's okay.
I don't know why.
Okay, so I just finished the sequel to this other book I really want to talk about because it's so freaking good. And it's called Borderline by Michelle Baker. And it's a fantasy novel that takes place in LA, in like the LA media movie scene. And it also has to do with fairies. And the main character is she has borderline personality disorder and PTSD, and she's also a double amputee. And she is
going on.
Not a good character. Like, she's not a good person. And she's really awful and really moody and like it's like really mentally messed up. And this whole thing is like she gets drawn into something called the Acadia Project, which has to do with like fairies and paranormal stuff in LA. Great book. Absolutely loved it. Super fast paced, really interesting world, really cool side characters. But the reason that I liked her so much, even though you don't like her, is because it's just such a different mindset than anything I've ever read before, which makes her so compelling because she's not a good person. And the whole arc of the plot is not that she becomes a good person and like learns how to love herself, in 4 days. Like, it's not that at all. And so it's such a cool story hearing it from that perspective.
I feel like that would be refreshing. Again, like how Not Even Bones doesn't make any excuses for the characters. Like, sometimes I need that because I feel like all of these, like you said, learning to love yourself in 4 days, like that's kind of unrealistic. But so I don't know. That sounds like something I should pick up.
You should. It's amazing. Really, really enjoyed it. Very different.
So you guys are gonna hate me because I didn't warn you about this question. But so what is your number 1 tip when you are writing a character to try to make them compelling? I'll go first so you guys can think of what you want to say. I think for me, I was actually having problems with this. And I had multiple beta readers tell me this, and it was because for all of my preaching about giving your character a goal and a motivation and obstacles, I did not have a solid concrete goal. She was kind of reacting to things as they were happening, and then her goal was to basically not die, but that was not enough. She needed something in the beginning to drive her to do things instead of just react to things. So that's always what it boils down to for me almost every time, is a solid motivation, and then throwing things at them to make it, she has to work to get what she wants. So does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
I'll kind of build off of that. That when you're kind of figuring out because there's, like I mentioned, there's the whole advice of figuring out what they fear, what they want, and what they're willing to do. And when you're figuring those things out about your characters, if you're having trouble figuring any of them out, think about how the different characters' wants and fears can play off of each other, because it's very powerful when you have characters who are foils to each other in different ways. So like in the book I'm writing right now, I have two characters who both want the same thing, but what they're willing to do for it is very different. So like, and then also like make sure that whatever your character fears, that they have to face that at some point. And especially if they have to face that fear to get the thing they want, then that's really great.
For sure.
I would give someone a secret that's not boring. And I know it's like, that could be anything to anybody, but I find when I'm reading a book about, you know, a person who, I don't know, cheated on an exam, I'm like, I don't care about that. Like, why is that such a, you know, okay, yeah, it's a big deal in high school terms, but like, I don't care as much. And so I'm like, I'm not really willing to do that. Like, I'm not willing to go on that adventure with you. But if the secret is like, you're trying to overthrow this government and it's also your father and, you know, it's like that kind of thing, I'm much more interested in that. Or even a secret that's, you know, oh, you were the one to kill that really important person that the main character loved, you know?
A little like, don't write a contemporary book.
I think that's what Rachel
Oh man, I
just-
don't mean that. Okay, so actually just thinking now, so like One of Us is Lying is a great contemporary book, great contemporary thriller that I really liked. I know we had like a chat on here and some people disagree with that, but one of the characters in that does cheat on an exam, spoilers. And like that's kind of part of her secret, but that's not the reason why she's compelling.
Yeah.
Because like she's so focused on being perfect that like that little slip up and like that want is so intense that it drives her to do something that she's not like, she wasn't willing to do before. And so like that secret of like that part of the secret, not that she cheated, but like that, yeah, that she like overwrote her own ideas of herself to like get that. Like that little part is much better to me than just like she cheated on a test. I'm like, oh no, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And that goes right back to the things that they want and the things that they fear.
That
So
seems to be the
Yeah,
main...
like willing to do it together.
everything should be built off of those things.
Giving them flaws is another big one you'll hear a lot of. Your character's not going to be good at everything, and the thing they're not good at should play into what it is they're looking to achieve. But that is a thing that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, for sure. And these have all been like amazing, and there's not really anything I could add to them, but they're all very macro on like a more micro scene by scene, line by line level, looking at the way your character interacts with the people on the page with them or like with their world. So for example, to all the boys I've loved before, we've got Peter Kavinsky, who everyone has fallen in love with this summer, obviously. And two parts like super jump to mind to me where it's like, oh, this shows a lot about his character and makes you like, oh, or whatever. But the part where he's in the diner and he like goes to the effort of reading the waitress's name. He's like, oh, thank you, Joan. And you're like, oh, that was really nice. And then also the part where he's like having a pillow fight with the little sister. And before the pillow fight gets too rowdy, he picks the popcorn up off the couch and sets it very gently to the side. And just like really small details like that can tell you a lot about a person's character without being like, and Peter Kavinsky was very respectful and cared a lot about people.
Yeah.
Definitely in general, make sure you're like showing things about your
showing
character,
little
not
things.
just telling them.
Also, a quick side note, I find it really weird when complete strangers at my work refer to me by name because I know I'm wearing a name tag, but I've never met you before. So when you're like, oh, thanks, Rachel, I'm like, do I know you? Like, it's weird. It's really weird, okay? Don't do that.
Nah, he like took
Like,
a
if
second,
you can be like, oh,
looked
like,
at the name
thank you
tag,
much.
so it was obvious that he was looking at the name tag.
I mean, you can be like, oh, what's your name? Then look at my name tag and be like, oh, Rachel, like, thank you so much, Rachel. Like, that's okay, but you're just gonna throw it out there. It's just very strange. Crosses a boundary that I don't know you yet.
The Gryffindor in me is like, no, my name is there. Call me.
Well, my name tag's there, so you know that I work there. That's what it's for.
My name tag is there to make friends.
That's not what
Obviously, see the Gryffindor and the Slytherin of the group.
I didn't really like it when that happened either, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a bad thing to have your character do that, because it tells you about the character's personality. But yeah, in real life, it always just startled me. Like, what?
Do I know you? Like, should I be knowing your name?
You're welcome, Bob. I don't know.
Maybe that's what I'm just gonna start making up names. Walk away. Thanks, Craig. And they're like, what?
You're welcome, Nancy.
That's not my name. Really. You don't have a name tag, so I'm not really sure. I'm just gonna make something. You look like a Craig.
You look like a Craig. So.
You look like a Paul.
So, have you run into a character in a book? We're not going to mention any names, that you did not find compelling, and if so, why?
I did very recently. I will let someone else talk. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I can't really
I'm just
remember
excited to
those
see you
ones.
guys again. I've been gone for so long.
What did you not find compelling about the character, without mentioning what book it was from?
Okay. The best I can say, I did not finish the book that I started because of this character, because I didn't care. And that's, I think, the main thing. And he's supposed to be compelling because he's going to go on this major journey because the boy that he loves is like in a lot of debt and like promised to do this impossible thing. So he's like, I'll do it for you. Like, I can do that. But then the guy is like cheating and being off. This is like a fantasy novel, so like he's off doing like weird gambling things, and like he's, you know, betting against him and all this stuff, and like kind of messing around with other people. And he, like, the main character knows that, and I'm like, why would you decide to do that? That's an idiot decision. And it's not like a but I didn't feel it was a, oh, like, I'll do this so he'll fall in love with me. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're being an idiot. Like, just because he's hot, like, does not mean you should be doing these things. And I think I understand, like, that was the whole, he'll fall in love, he'll love me, you know, like, I feel like I should be, you know, doing something like this grand gesture of love or whatever. But it was like, dude, you need to like sit down and think about this for a second. And so I wasn't compelled by him because I knew that he was making really crappy decisions, and they weren't decisions that I could understand being crappy in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, if you're young and in love in a contemporary novel and you're like, oh yeah, you know, I'll be on the prom committee, like, that's different than being like, I'm gonna do this impossible task because I love you, even though I know that you're being a terrible person to me behind my back. Like, I can't do that.
Huh.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I feel like for the most part, when there's characters that I don't find compelling, it's usually either that, like, I just don't care about them, like Rachel said, and that tends to be a problem of either the character not being like developed enough or the stakes not being developed enough. So I just like don't care about what's happening to them, or it's that I like don't understand their decisions. And I don't understand why they're doing the things they're doing. Those are usually the two issues.
That's a big one for me too, actually, is the too stupid to live characters that do like really just insensible, stupid things that end up getting them like
Not
in a
even
lot of
just
trouble.
that, but just like things that I'm just like, I don't get why you're doing this. You know, like,
Yeah.
I don't get why you're making the decisions you're making.
Also, I feel like characters are not realistic when, like, sometimes in some books I feel like the author's trying to make a lot of drama happen, so they have like overreactions to things.
Yeah.
So I feel like as soon as you've got a character that's doing that and is acting unrealistic, you lose me there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And unlikable characters. Like when I first started out reading YA, I was put off of first person for a while because a lot of them, at least initially, felt very whiny to me. And straight away for me, that's an unlikable character too. So that's definitely something I don't find compelling.
Yeah. I find too, like, a really shallow lack of self-awareness to be very frustrating. Because obviously, like, your character's going to have a major flaw and they aren't going to be aware of what that flaw is at the beginning. But when it's more silly things, like I'm reading a book right now where the character keeps consistently referencing how ugly she is and how that's affecting her entire plot because she's so tall and, you know, not skinny, but not big. And she has all these very dark features, and they're so ugly except for her startling green eyes.
Oh,
And she's acting like this is like, and like it's inhibiting her plot because she's so ugly, but like, it's like, no, this is really shallow. It's obviously not true. All these people are telling you you're ugly, but everything the author is telling me is leading me to believe that you're super hot.
Yeah, of course. I feel like that's a rookie mistake.
Yeah,
like
very much.
Yeah, that should be edited out if you write that at all.
Yeah, this is an older book, and I think people get away with it less now.
Yeah,
because
it's become so cliche. Yeah.
And I also hate when we're told so many things about a character, but then we're never shown those things.
Yeah.
Or like everything we're shown is like the opposite of that. And we're like, is this character like when it's like, oh, this character is like super smart, and then they only do dumb things. Or like,
exactly.
or like they're just really vicious and mean, and then they're like really nice. But you know, it's like things like that where like you feel like the author is trying to make you think a certain thing about, you know, like the author is like, this is who the character is, but then none of their actions reflect it.
Yeah, I remember being really frustrated with a character like that who, I mean, again, fantasy novel, where, you know, she's, after all of this stuff has happened, the love interest is like, oh, you're so brave, and, you know, you went into this battle and you've never done it before, but you went in anyway because you loved your brother, and like all this like stuff. And I'm just like, y'all, no. She made like a really dumb decision to do this, and then was like, I'm in the middle of a war, great, and then just like had a training montage for like 4 pages, and then like miraculously somehow did not die, and now is at the end of this war. And yeah, I'm just kind of like, what about that tells the love interest that she is brave and desirable, other than the fact that she made a really stupid decision and followed someone that she shouldn't have? And I'm like, that's not, I don't think that's brave. Like, I think that's just, you're being an idiot and you miraculously managed to survive this long. Maybe that's the Slytherin in me coming out, but like,
I know this probably isn't the book you were talking about, but that whole thing super sounded like Twilight.
It was not the book I was talking about, but I mean, yeah, accurate a little bit.
I think one of the huge issues I have now is characters that are very tropey, but that are not turned on, the trope isn't turned on its head enough. Even in To All the Boys I Loved Before, which I loved, I've watched it like 3 times now, but the snitty high school like bully girl, when she came on, I was like, like
I liked her much better in the book.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Oh, I guess they kind of painted her over as
she's definitely still the mean girl in the book.
Yeah, the mean girl, but
it goes much deeper.
I think
more
that's
of a character. Yeah.
Once again, an issue of like an older book when you could get away with that more, because the book's like 4 or 5 years old or something.
For sure. Yeah. That no doubt. But yeah, when I watched that, I was like, oh yeah, mean girl. Although she was the catalyst for one of my absolute favorite tropes, I guess, which is like the fake relationship. I love that. And so the fact that she was the catalyst, I was like, okay, I'll deal with her. Like, so yeah, I don't know. I like tropes, but I don't like tropey characters, I guess.
You have to know how to handle a trope.
Exactly. Yeah. It should be different. Yeah.
You have to be aware that it is a trope.
Yeah. Exactly. You're probably right about it being an older book and it wasn't such a cliche at the time.
And when you're writing, I know a lot of time it's really difficult to see when you are following a trope too closely and not realizing it. And that's where beta readers can come in, and it's really useful. Or even like alpha readers or someone you're just like spitballing ideas off of, they can help point out to you like, hey, like, did you notice this is kind of predictable or a trope?
Yeah. That's why it's important to read so widely now too, because for all we know at this time period, we're probably creating more tropes in YA, you know, that are like slowly forming, just how like the Mean Girls trope wasn't, you know, as as obvious 5 years ago. It could be something else 5 years from now. So I don't know. It's just good to just keep updated and know what everyone's writing if everyone's writing the same type of character.
And I'm like, ooh, what new trope are we creating right now? Like,
I don't know.
What's it gonna be? Ooh. I'm trying to think of it. I'm like, I have no idea.
I have no idea either.
We have a couple of good answers to this question in the comments. Leah said, a character who I didn't find compelling was one who didn't ever try to figure out more about the situation she was in. She was content to have nothing happen. Which, that's a problem.
What would even happen
not
in
the driving
story?
force. Yeah. That's obviously an issue of like the character not being the driving force, like just the plot kind of like pushing them around.
Yeah.
Very reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
We also had go ahead.
I was just going to say, this book shall remain unnamed, but it was a character who just like accepted everything, like with no shock, you know what I mean? So she didn't thrust into this other world. She was like, okay, cool.
That seems right.
I have these magical powers. Okay, I can do this. Okay, I'm going into this other world. Cool. It's just another thing where it was like,
I'd like that like flipped on his head of like a hardcore fantasy nerd who's been preparing for this their whole life and it's just like,
I
knew I'm trying to write that right now.
I want that so bad.
I'm
trying to write that right now.
Yeah, I feel like that can be well done.
But that would be great.
Intentional, and there's a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even know I wanted that so bad.
I'm trying to write a story right now.
I'm trading for this whole life.
But I feel like even in that situation, there would be some moment where the character would be like, "No, this isn't how this is supposed to happen." In some way, they need to be.
That would be part of her motivation, and like what she would come up against too is like, no, this was the way it was supposed to go, and this is not happening. I can't accept this.
Like, I'm like, I've never watched Lost in Austin.
What?
It's about like this like huge Pride and Prejudice nerd who like in modern day, the movie is like 10 years old or something, or it's like a miniseries, and she gets like she somehow like gets sent back like into Pride and Prejudice, and like her and Elizabeth Bennet get switched, their lives get switched. She messes everything up. She messes everything up, and then she's like, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. Like, you're supposed to fall in love with Elizabeth, and Bingley's supposed to fall in love with Jane. And so she's trying to make everything happen the way it's supposed to happen. And like nothing is working out right. It's so good. It's hilarious.
That sounds cute.
Yeah. It makes me think of I Believe in a Thing Called Love by Maureen Hu.
Oh, yeah.
Where she tries to make this love story happen by following all these rules of K-dramas. And they all start falling apart, and she thinks she's not holding it together anymore. She's like, this isn't how it's supposed to work. But then really, like, as the reader, you're like, no, this is following the rules. You just don't like what's happening.
I got really frustrated with that character, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like kind of annoyed that I felt like there weren't enough consequences for like the stuff.
Oh,
she
yeah.
did. Like everyone just kind of accepted it at the
I
end.
think that was one of the notes I put down.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm trying to write a story right now. And I'm like, I will let you. I'm like, please beta read it for me then, because like, who knows what it's going to turn out into. But like, I want to do that so bad. Where I was thinking, someone made this comment to me a little while ago, saying, like, oh, you know so much about like fairy stuff, like you do fine in Fairyland. And I was like, challenge accepted.
Interesting.
So now I'm like, okay, so I wanted to write a book about a younger girl who's like really into fairy tales, and she like knows all the rules, and she like knows that you should go on the left path, and you should only answer questions, and like don't tell them your real name and all this stuff. So she like goes and tries to get kidnapped by fairies, and then one day she actually succeeds. And she's really excited because she's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to fairy world. Like I know what I'm doing. Like I know what I'm doing. This is gonna be great. And then she gets there, and it's not at all like she expects. And so she like kind of like gets taken in by the fairy queen. And then she's like in court for a really long time. And she's like, this is not how it's supposed to go at all. Like I'm not having fun. I want to go home. And they're like, well, like I don't think so. Like we're just gonna keep you here. And then eventually, there is like a bit of she's trying to find a way to be able to get out of it and go home, and there's like a whole quest to go find something, and in return they'll give her freedom back.
That sounds really good. You could use like The Cruel Prince as like a comp title for her. It was
like
a human girl in Fairyland.
Yeah. In Fairyland there are no fish sticks.
I don't know what that's a reference to. Is that
Cruel
Prince?
Prince.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the
I still
lines in
haven't
there.
read that. I really need to.
Oh, it's so good. But like
so
one of the lines is like something along the lines of like, in Fairyland there are no TV, no ketchup, and no fish
No
sticks.
fish
It's like just
Oh,
one line chapter, and then it's like the next chapter.
That book actually goes back to something that you guys were talking about with Not Even Bones, which I haven't read, but I have read Cruel Prince, and like the sort of love interest in that, the guy in it, like he's another character that like isn't really excused for the way he, like it's not like, oh, but he actually has a heart of gold under his tough exterior. Like, no, he's a jerk.
He's
Like,
actually really, really terrible.
he like is like hates humans and is awful to the main character because she's a human. And like you do find out like there are sympathetic things about him, like you find out like stuff about like his family life and stuff that's awful, but you're still like, but you're still a terrible person.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna like, this is like kind of life advice, but like I guess you kind of do this as character advice where like if you have a crappy backstory, it doesn't always mean that your character has to be bad. And it excuses like a little bit because it like gives them a reason to be doing certain things, but you can't just be like, oh, they had a bad family life, so they're
It's
a terrible
motivation,
person now.
but it's not an excuse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like an
It's just like,
explain, it's an explanation, but not an excuse, I feel like.
Oh,
You know,
there we
like,
go. Oh, I like that a lot. Yes. Explanation, but not an excuse, because I've had to deal with that for the last little while with an actual person. And it's just kind of like, I have plenty of friends that are who turned out absolutely wonderfully and have had terrible home lives. And, you know, I've had people come into my life that are not really that great people and they've had terrible home lives. And I'm like, but you could choose to be one or the other. So it's
still comes down to choice.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that would make a realistic character and probably compelling who was doing terrible things and continually excusing themselves because of their terrible background.
Yes. I'm like, I want to write a character about this person I know so badly. The only problem is,
Do
in
it.
real life, this character has no character arc. In a book, I possibly could make some kind of resolution or character arc or like learning experience. And I really want to do that.
Or probably be pretty satisfying.
Oh, it would be so satisfying.
See, let's talk about characters too like that. They're compelling because you love to hate them. Like Umbridge is the number one character of this description.
I can't believe we just talked about Umbridge.
I hated her so much that it became like I was almost anticipating seeing her on the page because I was getting so worked up. But you can't look away, right? It's so she's so compelling.
She's one of the best characters ever, but she is so awful.
Yes.
Oh,
One of those characters that's like frustrating to read, but not in a bad way. Like the author's not doing any. The author's doing everything right.
Yeah.
It's intentional. Yes, it's intentional. I'd love to write a character like that, and I think the reason she was so evil, but in such a compelling way, is because she was like lawful evil. I guess if you want to use a D&D term, like it was all like from the ministry. This was all rules. She was enforcing them. You know, she was being the way she was supposed to, even though you know that she's evil, right? I think that's what made her such a compelling and evil character that we all love to hate.
She was just so different, I feel like, from
She wasn't
so many
evil
other
like,
things.
you know, tapping your fingers together, all, wah, ha, ha, ha. She was evil in a bureaucratic way.
Especially like at that point in time in like children's literature, she was very unique.
I feel like you could get the same. I've had the same thing with some of the politician characters and say like Stephen King books and stuff. They're fascinating and very interesting for that particular reason because they're like shiny and good on the surface and then deeply rotten in their core. Like that to me is very interesting.
We had a really good comment from Helen that said characters always lose me when they're happy to just miscommunicate with the other characters. Like they'll hear a rumor about someone and instead of asking, they just accept it.
Oh my gosh.
Communication is key in any kind of relationship.
So many books.
Get this in your head, people.
So many books.
It's like if you can give me a good enough reason for why they aren't willing to communicate with the person, like if it's a big enough thing or something. I feel so many times it's just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna believe this thing that I heard.
It's just a misunderstanding and the reader can see it a mile away.
And I'm just gonna make this like really huge like decision based off of this rumor I heard. I feel like that's a lot of it too. Is it's like, I'm gonna go like do this like crazy thing. because I heard
very
about
frustrating.
my love interest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I felt like the whole third Divergent book was that. Just like a
Ugh.
series of
Yes.
miscommunication.
We have a
Emma's
whole
face.
chat on that, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. But that was a very big feature of that book that I always remember it for, was just like the sheer level of miscommunication. I was like, this is
In general, that whole
frustrating.
series had that problem of like miscommunication.
Yeah.
Like that was all the conflict was always, and like the romantic couple was constantly just miscommunication.
Mhm. And, like, I'm
talk
actually thinking
to
of-
each other.
Yeah, right. I'm like, miscommunication could also make a story very compelling, because I just kind of thought about this. One of my favorite series is The Alchemist of Loom by Elise Kova, which is like steampunk dragons. And there's this whole long plot line of trying to overthrow, you know, the evilness, etc., getting the people together and rising up. And one of the big things in the second book that made it so good was because there was so much miscommunication, because some of the characters could not physically talk to each other. And so you have like this plot line going on over here and this plot line going over here, and they need to meet, but somehow they can't. And like that made it so much more interesting, because I was like, what's going to happen? Like, are they going to be able to meet? What's going to happen if they don't? And then like there's a major character death that puts a huge screw in everyone's plans. And so like that was so interesting to me, because I was like, I need to know what happens with the story. And so like that, I think, was miscommunication done really well. And it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just not going to tell this person this for funsies. You know, it was like an actual legit reason that something would happen in like a wartime scenario. And it was so good. And it was so, that was what made that war story really compelling.
I do love that sort of thing where like characters like, yeah, are like in different places or something, and they're all making their own decisions, and you can see how like if you all knew what other people were doing, you could
Exactly.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite. And when the like effects of what they've chosen to do end up like touching the other character, especially just in a different POV, and you see it like coming together, and you're like, oh my god,
Like, oh no,
it's so good, it's so good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if they're
do love
trying to
stuff
make
like that.
decisions based on what they think would be best for another person.
Yeah.
but the other person is doing something else. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
That's the type of book that I will read in a sitting,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
you have to
exactly.
find out what happens.
and stuff, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Definitely. Another really compelling character I found, of course, I obviously have a type, but was the oh shoot, what the heck was his name? The bad guy, Prince guy from oh boy, the Grisha series.
The Darkling?
Darkling?
Yes, thank you. My brain just short circuited. I
love
found him
so
very
much.
interesting. I did not want him to be with the character. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I ship them. But I found him to be a really interesting, compelling character who had more facets than just like, I am clearly the bad guy.
Mhm.
He was more fully fleshed out than that. So
Mhm.
also Warner from
Mm.
Shatter Me. He was another really good one.
I think-
And like kind of was almost a trope where it's like, oh, he's really a good-hearted guy, blah blah blah. But at the same time, she did it so well that I was like, I don't care, I buy it. I'm fully in.
That one's really interesting because I feel like for me, in the first three at least, the fourth one kind of adjusted and fixed this a little bit, but in the first three, I found Warner very compelling and Juliet very not
I found
compelling.
Juliet
Yeah, same.
super irritating. Yeah, she was one of the whiny YA characters that I disliked, which is funny because I loved that whole series, almost everything about it except for her, the main character.
And then
And so I'm
kind
curious, like, what would have to happen to make her? Because she's obviously alongside a hugely compelling cast.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
she
I
was
feel
just for me like whiny for one thing, and
Yeah,
kind
she's
of
too passive.
she was passive and sort of over dramatic, maybe.
Yeah.
Like
I also
a lot of her inner dialogue was irritating to me, I think.
she was like kind of part of that. This kind of goes back once again to like older books. Kind of around that time, a lot of the like female first person POV main characters were like kind of self-insert characters, where like
Yeah.
they were kind of like bland and didn't really have a lot of personality, and you could just like kind of
Yes.
pretend it was yourself kind of thing. I feel
Yeah.
like that book kind of
She
did
was one of
that
those.
too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which I don't like. I think that almost suits certain books. It works sometimes, but in this case, she was not so bland that I wasn't irritated by her, because she was still bland and also whiny at the same time. So that was not.
Yeah. Well, like I think what saved her character in particular was that she was whiny at first, but then and very passive and very like, oh, poor me, like I don't know what I'm doing, oh, I'm gonna hurt people, and but like never did anything for it. And then she got to a point where she's like, I know what I can do. I'm done being passive. And like once you hit that point, which was like book 2-ish, then it was like, okay, I'm here for you.
That's
and
true,
like that point in any book is good. And like that's what makes the character.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which is still a character arc. It was just a very long character arc. So for the first book, you're like, oh my God. But yeah, I agree. Once she comes into her own and like really has a handle on her powers, that's when it got really interesting. And
well,
like,
even
I
in
get frustrated with people. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say even in book 4, Restore Me, she kind of not like reverts, but now she's the leader of this nation and she's a teenager. And so there is a lot of like, am I being used as a pawn? I'm very powerless. There's all these adults who actually know what they're doing, and I just killed a bad guy, and now I'm supposed to be in charge of all of this. And so there was a component of like powerlessness, but it was a compelling one because it felt like I'd seen her be powerful by the end of the series. And so then now seeing her be thrust into this scenario that was so obviously out of her element, out of like anyone's element, really was much, much more compelling.
Interesting. I still haven't read that last one. I really need to do that.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm gonna reread the whole series, I think, because I really did love it. And Adam was another character that eventually I was like, the twist and then the whole like, I mean, sort of a spoiler, but he was another character that I really loved to hate eventually.
I hate him
so much.
Yeah.
I hated him the whole time.
I never liked him. I hate him
the whole
so much.
first book I was like, because I did not like the first book and it was because of like their relationship. This is the worst.
He was very bland to me initially, and I think that's why I ended up liking him as a character later, because he had that twist. To me, it was realistic.
Yeah.
Very realistic to what some relationships end up turning out like.
Yeah, that's why I really liked that book, was because that it wasn't that she was with the first boy that she's ever met.
Yeah,
you know, forever.
How bland he was.
Yeah, like that was great.
Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah, I love when books do that because it's more realistic.
Yeah.
We have a really interesting comment from Nicole Wolf that I would love to talk about, if that's okay.
Okay.
So that's the real problem. Everyone has a different type, and not everyone finds the same things compelling. So I guess my question is like, how do you determine if the character that you're writing is not compelling or just not someone's type of compelling?
That's a really good question. Because obviously I'm demonstrating that with my whole, I couldn't get into it, I'm not a fan of Kaz Brecker, and you guys are all like, what, are you crazy, right? So obviously there's a huge
I think there's like definitely a difference between like beta readers saying like, oh, I'm just not a fan of this character, or I don't click with this character, and saying like, I don't understand this character, or like this character isn't interesting, or something like that. Like, because like personal preference, some people just don't like certain types of characters.
I think beta feedback is going to be great for that. The way I look at it when I get feedback from beta readers, I have one type of feedback that's like, I hated this character, they were so annoying, which does not necessarily to me mean that they're not compelling. And then I've also had this, I felt very meh about this character, or this character felt flat to me. And that's when I'm like, okay, clearly it's a problem. It's not just, it's not necessarily just a preference. Yeah.
A lot of it is knowing your audience, like knowing who you want to be reading the book. Like the author of Not Even Bones is not writing for me. I'm not going to feel that these characters are compelling, and that's okay. It's not, you're not going to please everyone, so know who it is you're looking to draw in, what kind of reader is going to connect with the rest of your story.
I think it comes down to as well that very, again, that saying that's like, they need to be likable or interesting is a really good, just like general basis, like the bare bones, right? It's like, when you're writing a character, am I choosing to write one that is likable, or am I choosing and sympathetic, or am I choosing to write one that is interesting, right? Just interesting. So that's how I usually start, by choosing one or the other and then giving them a solid motivation. Or forgetting to for an entire book, which is what I did. And I'm revising.
You know, not
Sometimes I feel
dying.
like it takes writing an entire book for me to really grasp what the
Yeah.
motivations are.
For sure.
That, exactly, yeah.
I find most of my first draft is just like figuring out the plot and like exploring the plot, and then afterwards I'm like, okay, now I have to actually figure out these characters.
Yeah. It's interesting what Nicole said as well about Peeta and Gale in the Hunger Games not feeling very compelling. I feel the exact same way. I felt bored by both of them, honestly.
Yeah.
I
Like, I was
them in
compelled
book
with how.
three.
Sorry, there's a bunny in the front yard. Okay.
It reminds me of that dog from Up. Squirrel.
Yeah, squirrel. Sorry, it's like hopped into my field of vision. I was like, "Cool, okay." Okay. Anyways, yeah, like I liked the relationship that, because of what the Capitol was doing and like why they needed that relationship, like why it was such a big deal that she wanted to be with the other person, like whatever. But like them together, I was like, I don't care about you guys at all. Like you're boring, and you're there for her to have romantic conflict with.
I always
It
loved
felt
Peeta.
like Gale was meant to meet. Like Gale was
Sorry.
irritating. I don't
Gale
like
irritated me
any.
so much.
I don't like anyone that sulks a lot
Yeah.
as a character, and I felt like that's the majority of what he did initially was
I
just
feel
like sulk about it not getting enough
and he
Katniss's
also, like,
attention.
Would try to like push Katniss to do things she like wasn't
Yeah.
ready, didn't want to do.
Like
Yeah,
what a jerk.
I never liked him, but I
No.
love Peeta. Peeta is my sweet cinnamon roll. he's wonderful.
Peeta is a fresh loaf of baked bread. And he is
I was
adorable.
very mad about Peeta as well. I just felt like he was there for Katniss to like
See,
have,
I appreciated that he was like a male love interest who was like allowed to be kind of like soft. So like Katniss was like the tough one that was like saving the day, and he was the one that was like, let's try and make friends. I appreciated that like their like kind of gender personalities were kind of switched.
yes, true.
I think
Maybe it's just like me as a type, but I'm like, I didn't find him interesting. I think because of that reason. So it was like, we're in the middle of something very important.
yeah.
This is the government uprising. Like, we can make friends later, but I
I
mean,
feel like
maybe
But they
we
needed
were-
the friends. They needed
but
the
they needed
allies.
friends, right? It's like, I need
like we were
allies.
saying, like you have a
Slytherin
type
versus
that-
Ravenclaw.
I was literally just gonna say, like, I feel like this is just like my Slytherin and probably Rachel's also coming out, where we're like, no, we need like a weird, twisted part of his character. Like, he's not interesting unless he's got some dirty, weird secret.
I think you both, Rachel and Erin, kind of mentioned something that's definitely important in making sure that a character is compelling. In that, like, you can't have a character who's just there to force the main character into doing things. Like, they have, your entire cast has to be, or anyone who's getting a significant amount of page time at least, has to be a fully realized character. Like, they also have to have their own motivations and fears and things that they're trying to do, even if they aren't a point of view character.
And it's better if those motivations clash directly with your character.
For sure.
This is an issue for me because I decided to write a book with a huge cast of characters.
Uh-oh.
No. And most of them are kind of in the background, but they're there enough that I should figure them out.
I was running into the opposite problem where I have just like two characters because I don't want anyone else's motivations getting in the way.
I've done that. This time, the way it's set up, characters. So, and they
I'm
can't just be
bad
set
at-
dressing. So
Wait, set dressing?
yeah,
That's awesome.
it's kind of like
I haven't heard that. That's great. Well, like, I'm super bad at making like sort of their characters. Like, they either have to be, I mentioned them once, or they are a full character in the story. But like the book, the fairy book, it's like a bunch of court fairies, and I'm like, I need some of them to have like some of a personality, but I don't know how to make them just sort of there. Like, no, they need like their whole thing. They need
The
to be
character
part of
Their
everything.
backstory, and suddenly I'm writing a
Yeah, I
book
don't
from
like
their
that.
point of view.
Yeah, I love the characters like pop up once and say something sassy and then like fade into the background again, and you're like, oh, this isn't good. This is not a character.
They just disappear halfway through the book.
I really often forget about characters because I always put in a giant cast and then I'm just like, oh, that's right. They haven't shown up in like 6 chapters. What have they been doing? I don't know.
I'm really bad for that with like family of the character. Oh, she has a brother or mom or whatever. They just like never show up again, even though they're living in the same house. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm like, the brother's up at boarding school and the mom works a full-time job.
No, she's dead, obviously, because it's the
yeah, and they're both dead. They're actually both dead.
Oh, you killed them both. Jeez, Rachel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I usually find that I run into characters like that where I put them in because I need them to push the main character to do something or give them a piece of information, and then I'm like, do I need you anymore? Aren't you done here?
The wise old man that's like, as you know, let me explain to you for 3 whole pages. I actually found this with Harry Potter the other day because I've been rereading the whole series. And Dumbledore does a lot of explaining in the later books. I'm just like, pages and pages. Like, it didn't bother me when I was like, obviously, until now, I was like, oh, there's a lot of exposition. And especially at the end of each one, it's like, oh, was that thunder?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Like, right
Whoa.
Emma's stomach is growling.
I feel like it also like would bother you less like when you're reading it for the first time and you like
Yeah.
the information, but when you already know the information, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like all right,
Yeah.
Dumbledore.
It's very much like at the end, like here we're explaining all of the stuff that happened and how it happened. It's like when I was in the woods and then I did this and then I did that. This is how it clicks together. And at the time, it's all being revealed and you're like, whoa, but I already all know all of that. So I'm like, oh my God, 4 pages of this. So
Also, I think that's like very much like a children's book kind of thing.
yeah,
You
I
know,
think
to have, like,
so.
the wise character like explain things to the like what was actually going on.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't get away with that as much in YA.
That's very true. Yeah, especially not for his 4 or 5 pages of it.
But I feel like it
That will be
almost
edited out.
reverses once you get back to adult. Because I'm reading Queen of the Tearling right now for our book club, which everyone should read Queen of the Tearling because it's our book club on September 30th.
It's so good.
Yeah, and like there's definitely huge passages of like, and now the guards are going to tell you the history because you don't know it yet.
I feel like this is why I stopped reading high fantasy for a really long time.
It's definitely an important balance to find because like you don't want to not put enough because like it also bothers me when we're getting into not character stuff, but it like bothers me when like a writer doesn't explain enough things and I feel like very lost in like the world and I'm like I don't understand this world, I don't understand the rules. So like you have to find a balance of like helping your readers explain this world you've just like, especially in fantasy, that you just like dropped them into and not like boring them with like details they don't need to know.
Yeah, that's why it's especially hard in the beginning chapters when you drop them into a different world and you're like, also don't want to do a bunch of backstory dumps. So
Oh my gosh. There's one book that like one of my friends recommended to me. It's a regular fantasy novel. And he recommended it so much. He's like, you're going to love it. It's so crazy. Da, da, da. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll give it a shot. And it's so weird and confusing. And the only reason that I kept reading it is, and I still haven't finished it yet, but because I got like a couple chapters in, I was like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? I'm so confused. Why is that like that? Why is this like this? Like, what world are they in? And so I got him to spoil it for me. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Okay, I'll keep reading it. Like, because like the world is just so bizarre. And it's like past but future, but like they're making references to like future day stuff and like way past stuff, but then it's also like fantasy, but then there's also like, oh, I can see the lightning in the background. Oh my gosh, I'm like, whoa.
Your face. Oh my God.
So
Now I'm watching Emma's screen to see if it flashes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a window right next to me.
Yeah. But like I still haven't finished that book just because it's so complicated and so strange, and that might be just because it's a regular adult high fantasy, but it would still be nice to kind of know some more rules of that world up front. So just like figure out how you're gonna pace that.
And you can make your character compelling by showing how they respond to all this new information.
Exactly.
Like a zombie walks into the bar and they're like, "Oh, hey Fred," or they're like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" Like,
Do they run away
Hey,
from
Fred.
the information? Do they
yeah,
come towards it?
Oh dear, that's good. I thought you were gonna tell a joke for a second there. The zombie walks into a bar.
I have no jokes. I only have like dad jokes, and they're not that long.
Great.
Okay, well, like I tell a ton of dad jokes, and I'm not a dad. I'm a faux pas.
Wow.
That took me a second. I was like, and
we have gone downhill into the realm of dad jokes.
Terrible dad jokes. Okay, sorry, back on track. Compelling character.
welcome to our chat.
Welcome to our channel.
Rachel is compelling us. with
Please
her dad
subscribe.
jokes. Subscribe for dad jokes.
More like, please don't unsubscribe.
We have devolved. Okay, we've been going for a little
Over an hour, yeah.
over an hour. Does anyone have any final thoughts? I'm gonna look over the comments.
I think we have a couple questions.
How do you make a villain compelling if they're in the background for most of the book and they're so ancient that no one knows they're evil?
Like no one knows their backstory.
Hmm.
Huh.
I think definitely just, even if your villain isn't on the page, it should be obvious, at least to the reader, that the villain is doing something that is affecting your character or your plot. And that should be like pretty scary.
And like build up the mystery around.
Yeah,
and stuff,
definitely.
Like, what is going on?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
How
show,
are they
like,
doing
how
this?
characters in the world respond to even like the idea of the character. Like you don't really see Voldemort for a long time in Harry Potter, but you constantly have like all these characters. Like
huge
just if you
buildup,
say his name, they freak out and they're like, "Don't say his name," you know, like things like that. So. And like there could be, even though people don't actually know like why they're evil or anything about them, there are going to be like rumors and like stories and legends that have cropped up. Like, oh, I heard that this is how this character became evil, or like this is their origin story. Like there's going to be legends about like their origin story, whether it's true or not.
It could even be like a similar thing to Voldemort, where it's just like, we don't talk about him. Like that is such a small amount of information. It's no information, but it tells you a lot. Like, okay, they don't even talk about him. They're not even mentioning his name. You know, like people's reaction basically to when the subject comes up speaks volumes. Ed Griswold says, do you try making every character, i.e. minor characters in your story, compelling? I try to make them all interesting, but I can't say every last one of them is compelling.
I don't think they all have to be compelling.
No.
I think Harry Potter's the only series I can think of where they all are. Where like all the minor characters are like, yes, I know who you are in your soul.
I will follow you.
You also had 7 books to learn that about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think just the main ones, and then the people that spend a good amount of time on the page.
Otherwise, you just need to get a sense that they're like a real person with a real life.
Exactly. So much thunder.
Wow.
Been storming for like 2 hours, so longer than that, I think.
Intense. Yeah. So Nicole just said, okay, so a villain can be compelling if they're mysterious enough. Yeah, I really think that saying like, what is it? Fear of a thing itself is something.
Yeah.
What's the saying?
Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So I think that's incredibly compelling, because not only do you want to know what this person is like, that's intense. Not only do you want to know what this person is like and the mystery behind them, but like it's working you up to realize that there's something big that people are really afraid of, right?
And there's got to be some reason that people are afraid of like
Exactly.
this villain too, like whether it's like just like legends and myths about them or like things that have actually happened.
And the reader is going to be like imagining this like vague, unspeakable terror. Like they're dreaming that up in their head, and you don't even have to say it in words, you know, for a good deal of the book probably. So. Okay, I think that's kind of all the questions. Unless anyone's...
It's a pretty thorough chat.
Yeah. Now we've got ominous rumblings behind us as we sign off.
Oh, you see the flash? Oh, wow.
Emma, you need to be like the supervillain now.
Yeah.
Do the evil laugh.
Turn off all the lights.
Okay, well, thank you everybody who joined us and for your awesome comments and questions. We hope to see you here same time, same place next week. It is a party. Or what?
Yes.
Bring your party hats and your cake or whatever else you use to party with, and we will see you next week. Kelly. Bye.